I've got a little list of questions here. Why don't you think of your own questions? We're going to spend about 15 minutes with some prepared questions that I've got right here, and then we're going to open it up to you to ask your questions of the panel collectively or any of the individuals on the panel. And of course, Johnny is accepting investments into his business as we speak. So,
take card or bank transfer.
Card, you heard it there first. Okay. So I'm going to kick off here with a fairly straightforward question, which I'll put to all of you. What are the barriers to adoption of Fintech and Proptech in real estate?
I think the most obvious one is the general conservatism within the real estate industry.
Well, I think you should think about the structure of the real estate industry. You have capital sources, mostly institutional. They are using a fund structure which is highly regulated. They are investing through agents in real properties. That is not a very easy industry to disrupt.
I would agree. I mean, from my experience, there's been bureaucracy, resistance to change, not just in the systems that they use, but the way they work. That is changing. I had lunch with a partner of one of the big agencies in the UK recently, and she said that her agency was like a tanker that couldn't turn, which I thought was a great description of it.
I can only add anecdotally that there's a lot of panic around what tech can do and the fear of being displaced by tech. If someone comes to you and says, oh, I can predict where the next gentrification hotspot is, which completely shameless plug will do, people will then go and say, no, you can't possibly know this without having operated in this area for 30 years. So there's a lot of that fear that we see.
So the not invented here syndrome and protection. I mean, there's a lot of well-established businesses in this space who don't really want young upstart companies coming and showing actually it's quite easy to do this with really good technology.
Yeah, and I think that there is this kind of opacity. There's a preserve of the men in the pinstripe suits with the Mayfair offices, and even some of the new digital investment platforms, for example, in the area we work in. For me, they look very much like a kind of digital version of the man in the pinstripe suit. Nothing's really changed. It's still kind of gold and black, the way it's done. And I think that, there's a real resistance to breaking that open. They all want to be able to carry on having their long lunches at Claridge's or wherever it is.
That used to be me.
Sorry, I was going to say, when Thatcher started in Sweden in 2000, there was a lot of talk of people being out of jobs, and what actually happened, and it's not solely as a direct result of Thatcher existing, but the transaction volumes have actually increased in Sweden since Thatcher came about. So it actually facilitated more activity. Fees may be lower as a result, but it's definitely increased the volumes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because essentially what Elizabeth does, what you do, Ollie, what we're doing, it's all about facilitating and streamlining things so that more people can be involved in these markets, so they're more highly functioning, so there's more transparency, so there's more depth to the markets. Right. And so eventually that leads to more housing, it leads to more efficient industry, it leads to better retail, it leads to more money in individuals' pockets and in institutions' pockets. So it's really good for everybody, and obviously it's jobs for developers in Proptech and Fintech and all of the associated industries around them, including these enormous kind of institutional incumbents, which are so hard to work with, but they are themselves now trying to address the fact that it's so difficult to partner with Fintechs. There was actually released towards the end of last year a paper addressing this problem, and basically 6, I think, of the largest banks got together and they gave indications of how fintechs should approach them in order to make sure that kind of meshing was as easy as possible. So there is a move from both sides now.
Right.
Hopefully that will continue.
Yeah. Excellent. So this question may appear to be addressed to Elizabeth, but I'm going to ask all of you to give us your insight into the ways in which artificial intelligence in all its forms will benefit real estate investment.
What I'm going to say, so
you go first.
We've seen that a lot of, so the area we operate in is residential, that's where most of my expertise is in, and we've seen that most of the things AI can do is something that you think you would pick up if only you had the experience. So say you walk through an area every day, you can see how it's changing, you can see the chicken shop being replaced by a yoga studio, you know what these signals mean and you almost subconsciously pick up on them. So you think you've got a unique insight that's generated by having lived in this area. And you think it's not replicable. But all that AI does is pick up a lot of signals and work like a big regression, holding everything else constant, changing one factor and see what effect that has on the variable, say house prices. So we see AI can replace a lot of local insight and a lot of what has been the reserve of the initiated view, the incumbents that happen here. That's one of the major disruptors we see. It's basically better decision making, better and more widely available decision making.
Just get my code. Possibly replaced. But that's the point. I mean, a lot of us in the industry do a lot of analysis that could basically be replaced with automation. We're using some very ropey data sets. Real estate data is very messy, as always outlined. And what AI can do is basically sort out a lot of the monotony and try and find different sources of information. So as data gets digitalized, then we can start to integrate it. So spatial data. And spatial data is actually quite difficult to manipulate. So we are going to need some quite clever algorithms and other people to tell the algorithms what to do.
I mean, I think that AI is also relevant to what I do beyond trying to replicate in some small way what Squire's doing, but also in looking at the patterns of the way that people invest, trying to learn about them. The investment industry, a lot of it is about understanding your clients, having a very responsible attitude to their individual financial objectives, what risk they think they can take, what they can actually take, what they're trying to do with their lives. And AI can actually take the place of that kind of sympathetic ear, which is often formed very badly by independent financial advisors, for example, who just got their tick list. You feel a little bit like...
Sorry, any IFAs in the room?
You feel like you've just gone in for an MOT. But AI can replace that, and as it learns more about you, it can really help you achieve things in the way that you want to do them, but may not have even known that you wanted to do them.
I'm looking at it from a sort of a much broader perspective. I can't really add to anything that's been said already from the perspectives that have been looked at. But if you look at the jobs that are repeatable and predictable, AI will replace them all eventually, and that will hopefully give rise to more creativity within the world, because the AI, the computer tech is not particularly good at being creative. Humans are very good at being creative, so it could free up a lot of people's time to do, more creative, or have a more creative role in society, which let the computers do all the repeatable, predictable, boring stuff, and everyone else will do.
Well, you say that, but AI-generated artwork was recently sold at Christie's.
In that case, ignore what I just said.
So, you've all had the opportunity to talk about what you do, but I'm going to ask you now to perhaps think of the most exciting use case of tech in real estate investing that's not one of your companies. So I think I've got a feeling at least one of you is going to mention what three words. But, give us a really exciting use case for tech in the space that's not your own product.
I have one that's exciting mostly because I've been looking to buy a property myself recently, and going through the leases, my background is I'm a lawyer, so I understand legalese, but it is such a pain. And there's a company that combines AI, which I care about, and does away with the legal work, or will hopefully do soon, and I'm very excited about. They're called Luminance AI, and they use AI on legal contracts, leases, etc. So they can go through a lease, and the AI flags things that need further diligence, if you want, flags unusual things, unexpected things. And you don't have to deal with it anymore. And And as someone who's raising money for a fund and going out and buying properties at scale, leases are one of the most horrible features of UK residential. So that's one I'm really excited about.
Okay. Anyone else got one?
Well, we recently came across a company called Proda. Now, one of the things about real estate data is not only is it messy, is that most investors have appalling systems and don't look after their data in any way, shape or form. And quite often you find it stored in spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are non-standard, so you don't know what the format is, you don't know what the layout is. And then you want to suck that data into a nice, clever analytical tool. So, we can talk about Leverton or whoever reading leases, but really we're talking about messy data. So what they do is they take a spreadsheet, they suck it in, and then the AI reads that spreadsheet, and then it gives me standardized fields. So that's the rental value, that's the start date, that's the rent start date, which basically means I can come into the office even later and start work even later because they standardize the data for me to analyze. So product, I should be on commission.
I might sort of talk about what three words, as I mentioned it already. I know you're friends with it.
Yeah.
So I think this is it's a really interesting bit of tech. I mean, you heard me say what it is before. Some of the use cases, they can use what three words to deliver, say, emergency services to locations in countries where there's no addressing system. Probably quite useful in this country, given that Google can't get postcodes right in this country because they use a rural mail. So I think, I'll go for the what three words. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out on their website. Go to your house or whatever, and you can see what their address is for you.
And there was a time when they first started out where you could actually set the three words for particular locations, like your office. So I'm not actually going to name what I did one drunken night out with friends at the bar, but it was pretty creative. If you didn't see today's paper, there was a lady who crashed her car. I think she had a daughter in the car. She flipped over and went over a hedge and ended up in the middle of a field. She skidded across the field on the roof of the car. She couldn't get out. She was pinned in it. The emergency services drove up and down the road looking for her, but because of the hedge, they couldn't see her. And she managed to get what three words up on her phone and tell the emergency operator, and they found her within 2 minutes.
Which country was that?
In the UK.
Amazing.
Yeah, there you go. It's not just abroad.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I'm going to ask one last question. I hope you've got questions. If you haven't, I've got more, but I'm going to ask one last question. It would be remiss of me, since we've not said the word yet tonight.
Does it begin with B?
And it ends with Brexit.
I was thinking of that one.
So,
I was thinking another word.
So I'm going to say the Brexit word and ask you, is this an opportunity, threat, or something else?
I'll go first. I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to say I hope it doesn't happen. I hope the Article 50 gets revoked and we can get on with our lives. If you want me to add another sentence. If it does happen, there will clearly be a lot of opportunity for overseas investor, just cashing in on a weaker pound. Although some genius did tell me, or I think I saw it in a tweet, what we should do, and that is tell everyone it's been done. Revoke Article 50, tell everyone we've Brexit, give everyone that voted for Brexit ration cards for food and NHS, and just get on with it. That's my take on it.
Tony?
God, I'm with Ollie here. I think it's just a disaster. But in terms of opportunities and threats, so I mean the threats are obvious. We're all going to be sort of killing each other with axes and roaming the streets with no electricity. But I mean, from my own business, I see it as an opportunity because we're offering the ability for all the people who are going to be fleeing the UK to invest outside of it. As Ollie said, clearly it's going to be opportunity for rock bottom prices here as the bottom falls out, so the vultures can fly in. I don't think I've got anything more constructive to say than that.
Well, the issue with Brexit is a lot of the damage has actually already happened. So we've now seen 3 years of very, very low investment in the UK. So whatever way it goes, we need to really get on with it. And the other thing is, when you're investing into uncertainty. Nobody actually knows what's going to happen in the world in the next 20 years. So people are going to say they were really clever in 20 years' time. Oh, I voted for Brexit, wasn't I clever? Well, I didn't vote for Brexit, wasn't I clever? We don't know, because all sorts of events could happen. You know, the euro is clearly a currency that's going to become under pressure at some point, whether it's a success or not. I honestly don't know. There's a risk. So there are uncertainties out there. So we don't know if it's necessarily bad or necessarily good. What I do know is that there's some parts of regional UK could get really badly hurt by Brexit. And these are areas with intense manufacturing, where a lot of the local economy is focused on one particular industry. You know, Sunderland springs to mind. But you don't know if they're going to close that car factory, and you don't know if they would have closed that car factory anyway. However, we worry about these concentration risks in the UK and what it might mean.
I have nothing clever to add to that, except for, as a European, I have no choice but to stockpile champagne and try to stay here. But for my business, it's actually a great opportunity, because the first fund that we're building on the basis of our data is a high-yield Airbnb short-let fund. And therefore, our entry price is now, because of, like you said, the uncertainty has already depressed house prices, especially in regional capitals as well as in London. So the entry prices are good for us, and our income is not linked to the domestic economy, it's linked to tourists coming in. Weaker pound, more tourists, more revenue. So professionally, it's a great opinion. Personally, I'm clinging on to it.
So, look, it's your turn. So,
Do you think it's going to be marketing efforts with AIM platforms and with
So when I say fund, that's a shorthand. What we're doing is we've got an English limited company, because at this stage we're only looking at high ticket sizes, self-certified, sophisticated investors. So we're not setting this up in any fund structure, and therefore the marketing into Europe is not an issue for us. And I have very little expertise in this, because we outsource the sort of compliance part to a professional firm.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on it?
Well, we know that virtually every single English limited partnership real estate fund has converted to most of them to Luxembourg. They're all going to Luxembourg. You've been to Luxembourg recently?
No, we haven't noticed that.
I know that within Fintech, a lot of firms use a sort of regulatory umbrella in order not to have their own in-house compliance team. It's cheaper, it's quicker, and I know people at a lot of these umbrellas. And the most striking thing is that most of them haven't even worked out yet what they do post-Brexit. A couple have sort of gone and set up in Dublin. Some have moved other places, but a lot of them are just like, we can't really make any strong moves. And so what happens to those firms who are actively marketing into Europe when and if Brexit does actually happen is anyone's guess with those firms. And it could be, I imagine it could spell the tragic end for some really early stage companies who've got some really interesting things happening.
anyone else got a question for the panel? Gentleman here.
I have a question, like, one thing like about my parents, like they are like of the boom generation, right? And they own a lot of these assets and houses. And the millennials, they don't own really houses. And at a certain point, baby boomers will die, and the market will be flooded with our parents' houses somehow.
You'll inherit them, won't
Yeah, we will inherit them. Yeah, but so this would mean that we won't buy any, or either we don't buy a house because we inherited. Somehow the market will be depressed, right? There will be less transaction. How do you think it's going to be?
If you look at the simple demand and supply dynamics for residential, they don't add up to the sort of house price growth we've seen. There has to be an investment motive for housing. Why is there an investment motive for housing? Well, frankly, it's quite tax efficient. It's quite easy to raise debt. Most people think it's pretty much a dead cert. Most people have seen their parents make a lot of money. and if there's a little bit of inflation, it's pretty much a one-way bet. So it's very dangerous to just look at the residential market and say, well, how many people are there, and how many houses are there? Because if you want to I'm a complete and utter denier that there's a housing shortage in the UK. There's no housing shortage in the UK at all. The occupancy rate of UK housing is 50%. It doesn't make sense. So if you add up all the bedrooms in the UK, we can have, I think we can have 2 each. I can't quite remember that. It might be 1.5. I need to check my stats. So there are enough bedrooms in the UK. However, people like housing to invest. So people have 2, 3, 4 houses. They might have more bedrooms, like parents. The taxation system is rigged. You know, you imagine being a political party and standing on a sensible taxation policy for residential. You absolutely haven't. No one's going to vote for that. So I feel really sorry for the younger generation. It's all rigged against them. But you will get your revenge, as you say, when we all die. So.
You've got all these things to look forward to in the younger generation. They won't have a property. Sea level's going to rise by 40 metres. And you won't have any investments left anyway, so a bright future. Yeah? Who's got another question for us? Yeah, one at the back.
If I could take it back to the retail, obviously our purchasing pattern is changing, we're buying online more and more. What do you think the demand will come for the retail when it passes?
It's a very simple pricing dynamic. You know, retailers can make money if they get enough footfall and the rent is low enough. At the moment, the rents are too high on our high streets. If the rents come down, retailers can make a profit. Actually, online retailing is incredibly expensive. And there are stats out there which basically say a lot of the online retailers are using capital and they're not making profit from what they're selling. Really, they should be charging you for delivery. They should be charging you for returns. They're lucky, the taxation system is rigged in their favour. We have a government that seems absolutely incapable of understanding that the high street is dying all around them. They seem to be totally preoccupied with Brexit and unable to do the most simple, obvious steps. The market will correct. If rents are 30-40% lower, the high street will survive and indeed it will thrive.
So retailers, I think, will they'll learn to adapt and they'll provide different offerings than they do. I mean, Apple are the masters of it. You know, you don't really go into an Apple shop to buy anything. You just go into an Apple shop to go into an Apple shop. You know, everything else, you've already bought the product probably. Other retailers will follow suit. It's much more about the experience.
The Apple store in Covent Garden is the most profitable store in the world. Revenues are like 1.5 million. Shop. They can afford a bit more.
Outside of London? Because it sounds very London-centric to you. I live in Kent, and there are shopping centres in the arse end of nowhere, and they're just dying.
We talked about retailing. We didn't talk about the format of retail.
Yeah.
The problem with shopping centres is they're incredibly expensive. So if you were trying to run a shopping centre when your rent is down 30-35%, the economics don't add up. The other thing about shopping centres is who said shopping centres would be around for 50 years? When they built the new shopping centres in the 80s and 90s, there were already shopping centres, but they were quite tired shopping centres, and you can still see them in our town centres today. So these shopping centres were always going to depreciate, they were always going to get older. We're seeing that in a very accelerated form. And these landlords are going to have to get clever. I'm quite excited because landlords are quite clever where they have to be. And they're going to start adjusting, and you're going to start seeing more uses. You're going to see them converted to resi, you're going to see them used for distribution. But it's got to change because I see a future for retailing, but shopping centre formats are a very expensive format, and frankly there's a reason why E2 shares are 30p in a pound.
Okay, we've got time for, you all put your hands up right at the end. So we're going to take two more, these two. So you go first, sir.
But do you think retailing is dying maybe more because of the customer behaviour is changing? I know when I go into a store and I go and buy something and it's always out of stock, and I would much prefer to just go online. and it's just a waste of my time to go to a store when Amazon can get it to me next day. So I think arguably, yeah, it's to do with rents being awfully higher than what they should be. However, the customer journey, the experience itself is just a little bit poor.
Well, retailing is about logistics, isn't it? I mean, the great thing about going into a shop is you get it then. If I buy it online, I have to wait a day.
But then when you go into a store and it's not there, which happens quite a
What
lot.
if you go online and it will not be there? That's why it's all about logistics. It's fascinating logistics. A lot of retailers' logistics networks will basically determine whether they survive or not, because they have to have their logistics units in the right place so they can take orders from the customer. The peak customer ordering hour is 9:30 p.m. or something. They've got to be able to deliver that the next day. A lot of retailers simply do not have the logistics in place to do that, the existing retailers. They will die. They are dying. I personally think that some of the big name retailers are going to come under extreme pressure very soon. But new retailers will come along and they will be opening shops. Shops are effectively the last mile distribution point anyway.
So Malcolm, if we were going to short some of these big retailers,
Well, I looked at the Debenhams share price. It actually doubled, didn't it? But it was down at 1p the other day. I'm not a big believer in M&S. I think they're going to struggle. If you add up the amount of space that Debenhams have got, M&S have got, Debenhams and M&S, you know, if you take a shopping centre, they'll quite often have Debenhams, they'll quite often have M&S. That's a huge problem because in the department stores, what are you going to do with a department store? It's very hard to divide it up into different shops. It's going to be incredibly expensive. That's why E2's in trouble. They can't afford to refurbish their centres because it's going to cost them so much money. And the reason why they can't afford it is because they're a REIT and they have to distribute their income. So they're in a catch-22 position.
Don't Amazon have the market on distribution, don't they?
It's going to be very difficult for anyone. Well, they're building a distribution network which will deliver to 95% of the UK population within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And all of the developers have put on NDAs not to tell anyone what they're building and where. And then you discover suddenly there's 950,000 square feet in Durham. You're like, 950,000 square feet in Durham? Who wants that? And they go, well, I can't tell you. Oh, I see.
But it begins with A.
But you wait. If you look at the Chinese market, Amazon versus the Chinese, it's all coming. It's going to be so exciting. That's why I think there's more to come from logistics. And if you think we've got a resi problem, wait till they all start competing over the logistics side.
So that'll be a series on Netflix next year.
So post-Grenfell, there's a renewed focus on quality in real estate in general, everywhere. Have you seen any emerging trends in either Proptech, which addresses the quality of the stock, either new stock or existing emerging trends in Proptech?
There's definitely a trend towards, and this isn't new post-Grenfell, but a trend towards more efficient, greener buildings, a trend towards data which encapsulates how well a building functions. And there are people looking at at ways of capturing that data from old stock as well. So somewhere like London, you guys would know better than me, but I think it's something like 83% of the residential stock is completely ancient, and there's no data out of it as well. But there are some very interesting startups now looking at ways of extracting efficiency data out of old buildings so that they can look for ways of improving the quality and improving the energy efficiency. It's not quite an answer to your question, but I think that's one way that Proptech is looking to improve the quality of building stock.
Okay. Well, I joined the industry in the early 1990s. The organisation I knew was just selling off the last of the residential property that had built up in the 1950s. And the reason why they were selling it was because of all the rent controls the government had introduced in the 50s and 60s and 70s. That organisation is now one of the biggest residential developers in the country, and they're building high quality resi. And it's really interesting. It's a bit of an issue for the existing rental stock because they're going to get higher quality buildings coming into their local market, charging a premium rent, where all the tenants are going to go, they're going to go in a nice new building. So build to rent is happening now across all the cities in the UK. Obviously we've had a bit too much in Manchester and Leeds, but it's coming everywhere.
So we're going to wrap up there. First of all, would you show your appreciation please for our